Let's talk about a quarterback here that you're highlighting. 53rd overall, it's Justin Herbert. In the same range, Trevor Lawrence you can get. Who has more upside, Justin Herbert or Trevor Lawrence?
I would take Herbert with his upside, but I would not be surprised if Lawrence is better just based on what we saw last year. I think we kind of forget just how great Justin Herbert was. I know we don't necessarily talk about it as much as maybe we should, but the injuries that he was dealing with last year, the ribs, it seemed like he was just banged up all across the board. You had Mike Williams and Keenan Allen in and out of the lineup, and now you have a coordinator upgrade. The offensive line was really banged up as well. That's I think a big part of this also. And they added a weapon, and a potentially pretty significant one while really not losing anything, at least, as of now. Austin Eckler's still on the team. Gerald Everett's still on the team. So this is, I think a situation where if everybody's healthy and Johnson is only the third receiver, think about the potential. Josh Palmer now goes to the fourth receiver or however that works, 3 and 4. This was a 5,000-yard passer. This was a guy that, ran for over 300 yards. He had, a couple of rushing touchdowns on top of it. And those all disappeared last year. So, give him 300 yards rushing, give him the opportunity to bounce back to a 5,000-yard passer. And in 2021, he threw for 38 touchdowns and it dropped down to 25. So let's just say that splits the difference. He's 33 touchdowns. That's a pretty, or 30, 31, 32 touchdowns, whatever the difference is. That's a pretty significant guy right there that you're getting at a great discount. When you're talking about, he was the second quarterback in a lot of people's minds last year behind Josh Allen. People were drafting him ahead of Patrick Mahomes. And so everything just seems to be hopefully aligning for one of the better bounce back candidates. And I do think he could be special, so getting him at a discounted price this year is pretty encouraging.
Did you mention Rashawn Slater?
I said the offensive line was banged up. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. That's a big deal. There's just too compelling of a case, to not recognize the upside of Justin Herbert, who just a year ago, or I guess 2 seasons ago, was the number 3 quarterback in fantasy. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, some players a little bit deeper here. Yeah, I guess it's not rocket science to say that DeAndre Hopkins has a lot of upside and Justin Herbert, but still, great value on Herbert, round 5. But some players that maybe you don't see the upside. We'll have to make a different kind of less obvious case for Jerry Jeudy, J.K. Dobbins, DeAndre Swift. We'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today. All right, so far, Jamie's talked about Watson and London as a combo and Justin Herbert as upside plays in rounds 4 through 6.
Can we just stop there for a second? Just because I want to just tie this in with Herbert when we talk about value. So just looking at the ADP that you referenced, the Fantasy Pros ADP, Jalen Hurts is the 18th player off the board. Mahomes is 19th. Josh Allen is 20th. Then you go to the next group of quarterbacks, which starts with Lamar Jackson at 31 overall. Then it's Justin Fields at 38 overall, Joe Burrow at 40 overall. So we're getting closer to where, Herbert is being drafted. But think about it. Is it that much of a stretch that he's in that same group?
No,
not for me.
No.
Not for me.
All right. So Jerry Jeudy is someone I'm very excited about, and cue the laughter about Courtland Sutton last year. It's pretty obvious I was wrong about that. One of the reasons I was wrong is I think Jerry Jeudy is just a better wide receiver than Courtland Sutton. He is showing it. So first of all, just some basic stats. He was wide receiver 22 per game, but he had 3 games where he barely played. And in those 3 games, he had something like 54 yards total. If you took those 3 games out, he's averaging 15.8 PPR points per game last year, Jerry Jeudy. That would have made him a top 15 wide receiver per game. He did that on the lowest scoring team in football. The Broncos scored the fewest points in the NFL. It was basically like the first 6 weeks, Courtland Sutton was the guy, and then that flipped, and Jerry Jeudy just got so many more targets and outperformed him so dramatically. One of the things I like about him is that he was top 5. He was top 7 in 2 categories: explosive catch rate, that is catches of 16 or more yards, and yak per catch. There were only 2 wide receivers last year that were top 10 in both of those, and they were Jalen Waddle and Jerry Jeudy. He profiled very similar to Jalen Waddle. So that was, by the way, wide receivers with 50 or more targets. There are a lot of, I won't get into all of the advanced metrics, but there are a lot of really encouraging advanced metrics on Jerry Jeudy. He's going into his 4th year. He's only 24 years old. I think he emerges as the number 1 guy. I definitely see some reasons to be concerned, and this is not a downside show, but I could definitely see some pokes in the argument against Jerry Jeudy. But I think people might not be aware of just how encouraging last season was, and I think it's because he barely played in 3 games. So his stats for 15 games, and he missed 2 games too. His stats for 15 games aren't amazing, but if you put his stats on 12 games, start talking about a really damn good season that he had last year. And I expect much better things from the Broncos, who made two of the biggest investments in offensive linemen this offseason, by the way. They added two high-priced offensive linemen, McGlinchey and Turner. So a lot going in the right direction for Jerry Jeudy, and it would not surprise me if he had a massive breakout and finally lived up to the potential, and you can get him around 5-ish. He's 48th overall. Thoughts?
I don't necessarily disagree. I think the one thing that you'd be a little bit concerned about is there are potentially a lot of mouths to feed in this offense. And I know we talked about that at this time last year, but then Tim Patrick got hurt and really KJ Hamler wasn't a factor. So if we said this following the draft, I think we kind of all expect Marvin Mims to be a better version of KJ Hamler in that role. And if Patrick is back, and so now you're talking about maybe Greg Dulcich takes a step forward as a second-year tight end. Cortland Sutton's still there. He's still a very good player. I think as a complimentary receiver. I don't know if he's ever going to get back to his pre-ACL form, which I think was what we were hoping for last year. I know you were very excited about that. So was I. You're also asking Russell Wilson to, support a receiver to break out of this offense. And that might be a little bit tough to trust. But I think just at the price, it's hard to overlook what he has to offer. And I think it's encouraging by some of the things that came out, following what may have been their version of leaking it to try and trade these guys, see what they can get in return. But, Sean Payton saying how he loves these guys. He loves Jerry Jeudy. He loves Cortland Sutton. Now, again, they may not have gotten the value in return of any trade offers, but can he step out from the group and be, you hear me say this a lot, be the lead singer with the backup groups behind him,
Yeah.
So, Sutton, Patrick, Dulcich, Mims, Hamler, the running backs out of the backfield. We certainly have seen Sean Payton feature a receiver. I mean, he had one of the greatest seasons ever for a receiver with Michael Thomas. And it was as a guy that could play inside and outside, mostly on the inside. And I think Jerry Jeudy can profile as an inside receiver for Russell Wilson. So, I like it. He's one of these guys. I probably should have put him in the show when we did trouble ranking, because I struggle with how high he should go. And I'm looking at my rankings right now. I have DJ Moore at 21 and Jeudy at 25. And I don't like that. I'm going to flip those two. I'm going to put Jeudy inside my top 24 because I think he belongs there. And DJ Moore scares me by the minute, just in Justin Fields' offense. I think he'll be fine, but I just think that Jeudy has a higher ceiling. So I would take the young receivers personally still over him, of Watson and London. But I think Jeudy is right there with those guys.
Yeah, I made a mistake. I said McGlinchey and Turner. And thank you to Don pointing out they signed Ben Powers. Billy Turner was a tackle for them last year, signed with the Jets as a potential swing tackle, but they did high-priced additions.
These guys are probably better run blockers than they are pass blockers, but they're certainly going to add to the offensive line. So it's makes your argument very sound.
And then final thing on Jeudy, over the last 5 seasons, I mentioned that he was top 7 in both explosive catch rate and yards after catch per reception. There have only been 6 wide receivers, I think, over the last 5 years who have done that with 100 or more targets, and they are T.Y. Hilton when he was great, Chris Godwin, DJ Moore, Deebo Samuel, Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, and Jerry Jeudy. So 7 wide receivers, but it's a really good list. All right, let's talk about J.K. Dobbins, who is going 57th overall. Interesting choice here, because I, of course, would say, does he really have a lot of upside when he hasn't been a pass catcher? Maybe you think that's going to go up. But I think of like Nick Chubb, who's been one of the best running backs in football, and he's never, what's the highest he's finished? Maybe RB8 per game in PPR. So it was an interesting choice of Dobbins. I mean, I could see great value, but we're talking about just most upside here. Do you see that kind of, I don't know, first round upside from Dobbins if everything hits right? What do you think?
I just think that this offense is going to be much better. And that's, again, to what you said about no-brainer when you talk about, Hopkins' upside and Herbert's upside. Obviously, the Baltimore offense is going to be better because they struggled last year. Lamar Jackson missed a good portion of the season. They have added, significant pieces to the receiving core, whatever you think about Beckham and Flowers, but they're, I think, upgrades over what they have, plus Bateman coming back. But I think you look at the coordinator change, and I think Todd Monken is going to matter here for the running backs. This is a system that has not necessarily allowed running backs to catch passes. And I think that Dobbins, even if he becomes a 30-catch guy, gets to the level of what we've seen from Derrick Henry the last couple of seasons when he was more involved in the passing game, that only makes this type of player that much better. Yes, he certainly profiles more as a Henry, Chubb, non-pass catching type of guy, because that's what he's been. But I think he's shown the ability to do that. He showed in the playoffs. He had a 4-catch game in the wild card loss to the Bengals. So I do think that he has the ability to challenge to be one of the league leaders in rushing yards if they feature him to that extent. We'll find out what the touchdowns come, with the running quarterback and Lamar Jackson, what he takes away from that. But we've seen this is an offense that, Lamar Jackson threw to Mark Ingram once upon a time in his MVP season. He had 5 touchdowns that year, receiving touchdowns that season. So that's something that can, not something you want to, hope for 5 receiving touchdowns, but if he has a 10 catch boost, maybe, or 20 catch boost, maybe, gets again into that 30 catch range and can run for 1,200 yards and maybe score 10 touchdowns, he's going to obliterate this ADP. So does he have first round upside? A lot would probably have to happen. Does he have second round upside? I think so. When you start to look at the running backs there, it would not surprise me if he finishes in the range of an Aaron Jones, different how he gets there, Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, those type of guys. Again, I'm drafting those guys ahead of J.K. Dobbins, but I love him in this range. He's just an easy guy to, if you go receiver, maybe something else in round 3. If he's still sitting there in round 4, please draft him.
Does he have more upside than Cam Akers?
Oh, yes.
Does he have more upside than Isaiah Pacheco?
Oh, yes.
Right. And those guys go not long after Dobbins. Does he have more upside? Does Dobbins have more upside than the guy I wanted to highlight, DeAndre Swift?
In terms of upside, I think if Swift were to play his game and stay healthy, and by his game, just being the type of complete back that he has shown at times, then I would say if Swift plays 17 games in Philadelphia's offense and can somehow get involved in the passing game, then no, I would think Swift should be better. But I would draft Dobbins first because I think he's safer.